After the flood, humanity began again, but within just a few generations, pride returned, and nations tried to build a tower to reach heaven itself. Genesis 10 and 11 tell the story of how God scattered mankind and created every nation on earth. If you ever wondered what the Tower of Babel really means, hit like. It helps this message reach more people. Genesis 10 is sometimes called the Table of Nations. At first glance, it might look like a long list of names, but this chapter gives us something unique in all of the ancient literature, an original record of the world's peoples. After the flood, Noah's three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, became the fathers of the nations. Their descendants spread out, forming the roots of the cultures and countries we read about throughout the Old Testament, and even the nations we see today. First, we have Japheth's descendants. Japheth's line spread towards the coastlands and the distant north. Names like Gomer, Magog, Javan, Tubal, Meshech, and Tyrus appear. These names later connect to regions like Greece, Asia Minor, and even areas far into Europe. In other words, Japheth's family became the ancestors of many Indo-European peoples. Next, we have Ham's descendants. From Ham came nations that would play a huge role in biblical history. Cush, Mizraim from Egypt, Put from Libya, and Canaan. One name especially stands out, Nimrod. Genesis says Nimrod was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Nimrod establishes some of the earliest kingdoms, including Babel, Nineveh, and Assyria. This sets the stage for the events of chapter 11, the Tower of Babel itself, because Nimrod's legacy is directly tied to Babylon. Finally, we see Shem's descendants. Shem is particularly important because from his line will come Abraham, the Israelites, and eventually the Messiah, Jesus Christ. Genesis highlights Eber, the ancestor of the Hebrews. Shem's family remained closer to the region of the Middle East, forming tribes that would preserve the worship of the one true God. Now we move to Genesis 11, one of the most famous stories in all of the Bible, the Tower of Babel. The chapter begins by saying, "Now the whole earth had one language and the same words. Humanity was united. But instead of using that unity to worship God, they used it for their own pride." The people didn't want to be scattered, even though God had commanded them to fill the earth. Their project was an attempt to centralize power, build identity apart from God, and climb their way to heaven by human strength. The Tower of Babel was humanity's declaration of independence from God. Then comes the one of the most striking verses. "And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower." No matter how high humanity tried to build, their greatest achievement was still so small that God had to come down to look at it. God saw the danger of this unchecked pride. This is only the beginning of what they will do. So God intervened. God said, "Come, let us go down and confuse their language." Instantly, chaos broke out. People couldn't understand each other. Construction stopped. The unity that had fueled rebellion crumbled. The tower was left unfinished, and the city was called Babel, meaning confusion. From there, the Lord dispersed them across the face of the earth. The chapter closes with another genealogy, the line of Shem down to Abraham. From Shem came Peleg, whose name means division. Eventually, the line reaches Terah, the father of Abraham. This is the transition from the primeval history of Genesis 1 through 11 to the story of the patriarchs 12 onward. Abraham will become the father of Israel, and through him all nations will be blessed. So, what can we take away from Genesis 10 and 11? God values every nation and language. Human pride always fails. And God's plan of salvation is already in motion through Shem's line leading to Christ. If you have enjoyed this episode of Bible Explained, subscribe for more, and remember, you can also listen on the Bible Explained podcast or share your story at bibleexplained.podcast@gmail.com. Next time, we'll step into Genesis 12 and meet Abraham, a man who left everything to follow God's call.